You are listening to The Strange Accounts. I am your host, Matthew Carmona. If you've had an experience and want to come on the show, you can email me at thestrangeacctspodcast@gmail.com. Today's guest is Rose. Rose is going to be talking about the paranormal. Now, she's had a lot more other experiences than just the paranormal. She's got some cryptids. She's going to be also be talking about some UFO accounts as well. But in this first part, this is going to be a multiple part series. We just talked about her paranormal, and we didn't even get to touch on everything that happened to not just her, but her family. And this all happened at her house that her grandmother owned. So I think you guys are going to like this episode, and I hope you do. So if you would sit back, get comfortable, let's get to Rose. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to welcome Rose to the show. Rose, thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me.
Now, you got some stories, some interesting stories. I know you sent me some long emails about going into like the paranormal, some cryptids, and possibly some UFO stuff. So if you just want to start from the beginning, wherever that would be for you, and just go from there.
Okay. Well, I think this kind of is kind of like a story of my family and the events that have taken place in this home. It's in a small town in Iowa, and it kind of affected the entire family. It took a sweet valedictorian homecoming queen kind of girl, and took her from being so cheerful and bubbly to someone who is, quite possibly we believe she had some kind of possession. Obviously we didn't have it like confirmed, but she was, committed to get checked out, and there was a lot of signs. So it's really something I wanted to share with some people, because it's just so, some of it's kind of like traumatic, and you just feel like someone might want to hear this, because what if they're going through the same thing? And I don't know. It's just kind of helps you relate to someone. And so it's this really big house, and it's kind of like, I almost call it sometimes 3-story, because it had a huge walk-in attic, and then it had a huge walk-in basement. So it was real big. It had a huge curvy wooden staircase, and big brick house. It was beautiful. It had stained glass windows in the front. It was really nice. And apparently a lot of stuff happened in that house before we even acquired it, before my grandmother moved in there with her husband. I think she was like 15 when she got married, or something. It was really early. And so like things like a 10-year-old girl died at one point in the house. They say it was of tuberculosis, but she, there's a lot of things going on there. And she, shortly after, within weeks, her mother passed away. And on her mother's tombstone, they actually put, she died of a broken heart. So it's actually on the tombstone. And then shortly after that, the father died, and that I don't have confirmation of whether he killed himself or if it was something that happened to him, and we don't know if any of this was caused by like supernatural or not. It's just stuff that is happened in the home that contributed to the factor of, and the things that we see later. So at one point it was turned into a dorm, and so the college that the children attended was actually supposedly haunted itself, because this was like, a really small town, really small. And so, and it was like a farm town. So everything kind of is haunted because it's old. And so they thought the college was haunted by this woman, and that was like waiting for her fiance to return from war. And so that was like a really big deal. And then when they acquired the house, uh, they found apparently the person who lived there before was kind of like a witch of some kind, into the Wiccan or whatever, that sort of thing. And because they found satanic books buried in the floorboards, like in the attic and different places. There was actually like books that had like the text and the drawings and things that you couldn't even read what it was, because it was probably I never got to see them, but my mom has described them, and that it must have been probably like Latin or something, because something where that they did these things, and she would hold seances there and do all kinds of things. And like, if like my grandmother would dig in the yard. She was a gardener, and so every time we're in the yard, there would be just tons of these like tiny apothecary looking bottles. I used to love them. I was obsessed with them. But she would line all of her windows with them. And they were so pretty when the sun came through. But they're these little tiny bottles sometimes with a cork, or sometimes they look like genie bottles. Like, some were really big and elaborate and ornate. And it was like, what was in these things? At the time, I never even thought about what could have been in them. But like, looking back, I'm like, wow, those were kind of weird bottles. And I just always wanted them. And then so there was that. And then, like, I guess it started out pretty harmless when my grandmother moved in there. It was pretty. It was There was nothing that really spoke out to us that was like a dangerous situation or really too evil. But she kind of was feuding with her sister over getting this house in the first place. Sister really wanted it, so they stopped talking. And she was actually her neighbor, and they didn't talk for like 50 years. She lived just a house down. She wouldn't talk to her. It was and she didn't drive or anything like that, so she would walk to the store and all this. So it was just, a small kind of environment town and all this. And she slowly became kind of isolated and became kind of a quirky lady. My mom, when she was little, she would dream of fire for a long time, and she would tell her mom that she's dreaming that this house is burning in fire and all this stuff. And then her mom was like, well, the original house that was here actually burned down in a fire. And so I don't know how they rebuilt it necessarily, but I know back in that time period, they would often use like whatever supplies from the house were not damaged in the fire. They would sometimes use those things to rebuild. So they could have used some of the same bricks from that. And then when my aunt, when she was 10, she got really sick. And this neighbor lady came over and she says, hey, something happened in this house to this 10-year-old girl many years ago, and she choked to death in her sleep. So keep an eye on her, because it was same age, same time period that this happened. It was like, around the same series of events. The one that I told you in the beginning, that the girl had tuberculosis. So, it's kind of weird that she would even come tell you that. Like, it makes you wonder, like, then was it really tuberculosis? Like, why would you assume my 10-year-old girl has the same exact thing that this girl has? I don't know. But my grandpa stayed up with her all night, and sure enough, she started turning blue and choking, and he did wake her up, and of course she survived. She's not dead. But so that was kind of like a weird situation. And then my mom gets super sick for 3 weeks at the same age, and they thought she was just going to die. They were really concerned. She was not doing good, and she missed so much school, and it was just really crazy. So then more things started happening. It's just kind of a ramp up period where, like, little things, right? So you'd walk into the home after being gone, and it would be like someone had just made like baked bread, like really strong smell, because bread has a very distinct smell. Like, you just know when you're walking to a bakery or something with bread. It's like the yeast it's very strong, and you can smell it. So they would come in the house and it would smell like bread had been baking and no one had been cooking. And sometimes they'd come home and like a milk carton would be left out. And I know you think, okay, well, maybe they forgot it, but that's not kind of the kind of people my grandparents were. They would not have forgotten to leave something perishable out and waste it. That would not be something that they would do. And so there would be stuff out, like something was eating food or something when they were gone. It was just kind of weird. And then at one point, my I think it was fall, and my mom and her family were coming home from wherever, and they saw basically like three shadow people. They were dark, but you could make out features, but they were still like grayed out, but you could make out features on them. And it was apparently two women and a man, and he was in like a tall hat, and they were in very period clothing, and they actually just kind of passed through the house, like straight through, just walked from one end to the other. It's a huge house, so they just kind of went through it. You know, and my grandpa, he was a stoic man, and he clearly he must have seen it, but he wouldn't just acknowledge it. It was just like, nah, it was nothing, that's the type of, it was a different time period, and you didn't we're all real religious family, so we didn't really, you're kind of raised to not believe in anything other than like heaven and angels and things. It was kind of a time where you didn't talk about the other stuff, that people weren't as accepting, and it wasn't so understood that when there's angels, there's also demons and there's other things that can exist on this level here. So then like there's an instance where my mom and her sister are very young, sitting there arguing on the couch over, because the parents were gone and they were wanting to watch TV, and they're arguing over like, hey, you go get the TV guide, no, you go get the TV guide, and they went back and forth, and all of a sudden it floats across the room from sitting on top of the TV all the way to the couch, and just kind of hovers right in the middle between them. And so they're like, okay, that's weird. It must have been a draft. But the thing is this house did not have it. In Iowa, you don't really need air conditioning so much. So this house did not have any like central air of any kind. So that was not air. They had blown it to them and just hovered. And then there's instances where this is when it started kind of get a little weird, because it was like something didn't like religion or something in that house. It was starting to get a little bit like, okay, it doesn't like when you sing hymns and things. So like there was a piano in in one of the rooms that I called it like the green room, because all the rooms had a color. They were all like color coded. I thought it was a very cool house for that. And there was a big piano, and my aunt would play it, and my mom and her would sing hymns like a friend in Jesus, and Amazing Grace, and all these things. But as they would be playing, the room would drop in temperature. In the middle of summer with no air conditioning, it would get ice cold in there. Their hands would be cold, and they could see their breath. Everything was cold to touch. It would just, you could see your breath in there. It was crazy. But it was like only when they would sing really religious type things, it seemed to happen to them. And then, so a lot of times things would just break randomly, but they would not break like fall off a wall and break. It would be like they exploded from the inside out. You'd be sitting there and something would just shatter, like like maybe if you hit it with like when an opera singer sings and it just explodes, kind of like that or something. And it would just explode. And my grandmother would get kind of frustrated because at this point, she's starting to lose a little bit of her shine. She was, like I said, such a vibrant woman, but she's starting to get kind of a little more isolated because she stays at home with the kids a lot, and she doesn't drive, so she doesn't go out, and she doesn't really have like other friends and things. And she spends so much time in this home that, again, kind of seems to have had quite a history. And honestly, with some of the things going on there, we firmly believe that there's some kind of portal of some sort that was opened somewhere in there, probably the basement, because that's where a lot of things have happened to a lot of us. And I know basements are spooky, but like this is a whole nother level of spooky. It's just there's a hole in the basement. There's like behind where the furnace areas should be, there's this hole, and it goes all the way down, and you cannot see the bottom. There's a brick wall in front of it, and you cannot see where it goes. It's just black pit, and you try to drop something light in there, and you just can't see. You don't hear anything. You don't know when it hits the bottom. It's just a bottomless pit, and it's really creepy. And there's been times where my grandmother went later on in life, when she was recovering from what we thought was some kind of possession. She did mention there's a line in that basement, and if you cross it, you will never be the same. And it was funny because she would never say the house was haunted. She said there were people in the house. There were people in the walls, people in the house, all these things. She didn't call it haunting. She didn't say it was that. She was pretty sure they were real people, I think. But I think towards the end there, she started to acknowledge no, because she would say things after her incident. So, yeah. So, like,
Before you move on, let's talk. Before we get on to, there's a lot of stuff I want to kind of hit on a little bit on. So, you talk about this line. Like, what do you mean? Like, there's a physical line, or is it
yeah. So that's what she said, because we asked her, like, oh, is it kind of like one of those metaphorical lines? And she's like, no, it's a physical line. If you cross it, you will never be the same.
Do you know what she was referencing to?
I don't know what the line is, but it seemed like it was the back half of the cellar of the cellar area. I wasn't allowed to go back in that area. And it's funny because my aunt, she believes, and I don't know if she even really knows that story of the line that she talked about, but she does know that she said that she felt like there was something coming from this mason jar case that was like a giant shelf thing that was brought home one day, and she felt like something was that she felt that something coming off of that for some reason. She felt like something was like that was something, like the energy and things. She felt like there's something bad about it. She felt like that was something that was causing some bad energy. But that was in the corner, past the physical line that I believe that my grandmother was referring to. So it would be in that area. So that makes sense that could be something, towards the line that she was talking about.
Right. Now, this pit, like this hole, was this like a physical?
Yeah.
Like someone had dug it and they never covered it up?
I wonder if it might have been maybe a well or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's got, I think it's got brick on 2 or 3 sides, but then there's one side where it just goes concrete and then black. Like you can, and it's just like you could accidentally walk in it if you tried to turn around that corner and didn't know that corner had a big hole there. There was nothing ever like covering it. It was just a big empty hole, so you could easily just fall in. Yeah.
Is there kind of a reason why your family never closed it up, or your grandmother never did?
I really don't know why they didn't. I guess they just, it was probably like, well,
they trusted the kids not to go walk back there and fall in.
Yeah, it was. I think it was before the time when they had those little safety things for your outlets and for the drawers and the cupboards for your kids. So,
Right,
it was
right.
before they were really worried about that stuff.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay. Let's see. And okay. And so you said that it was your daughter that your grandfather was watching, and she was turning blue.
It was his daughter. It was
Okay, it wasn't your daughter. It was his daughter.
no,
Okay,
it was his daughter. It was my aunt.
okay,
Yeah, so it was my aunt. And that was she turned blue. And yeah, so that was when she was 10 years old, which was the exact same age as the girl that had just ran.
previously passed there before they bought the house. Gotcha.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Now your grandmother doesn't own the house right now, correct? She
No,
when she talked about, like you said earlier, she was
she
living in a home that was not the home you were referencing, correct?
uh so she lived in a nursing home after she had a very bad stroke, which there's quite a story with that. But yeah, so after that uh she, we ended up selling that house. So she's no longer with us, so she's no longer living anywhere with us. But she lived there up until she couldn't anymore.
Okay, that makes sense now. And I totally understand. I would have sold the house too. I'm not gonna stay in a house if I know,
Yeah,
with all
honestly,
these incidences going on.
she fought tooth and nail for that house. I mean, she would have died for that house. It had a hold of her towards the end. It really
Right.
yeah.
It seems like it when you talk about, like, she's when you say she was possessed, like, kind of go into that, like,
Okay.
what made you guys kind of think that she was possessed?
Okay. Well, there's a lot of stuff that happened after um in between. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff, but I guess I'll go back to that. But like when my grandpa passed away, that was what really triggered a lot more of kind of her uh, issues and things. It kind of got bad after the kids moved out. When my mom and her sister, because she was home alone a lot, and again, no friends or anybody. But then my grandfather would be at work, and she would be home alone so much. And then when he passed away, she had nobody. And so, I think my aunt and cousins tried to go visit her, but I feel like they may have made her feel a little like she was crazy, because honestly, we like I said, we when someone's talking to a lawnmower, you don't automatically think, oh, it's there's something in the lawnmower. You instantly will go to, like, I think they might be a little kooky. That's
Right.
kind of your first thought. But so I think her to keep her to protect my aunt's children, I think she told them, like, don't mind her, she's a little weird, but she's harmless, stuff like that. And but I think, her, when how brutally honest kids are, I think that we kind of like probably said, oh, there's nothing there. And I think it just kind of irritated her. So there was times when they would go visit her after my grandfather died, and she would be spinning in circles and spitting and just being like crazy, to the point that they had someone come out and commit her for a week or two or something, to analyze her, and so they could put a furnace in, because she wouldn't even leave long enough for them to put a furnace in. And it was in the middle of winter, freezing cold, and she had no furnace. um I mean, it's like she had no sense of self-preservation at that point. It was all about that house. It was all about, she would not leave that house. It was not a matter of, I don't want to go anywhere, I don't want to see other people. No, it was, I don't want to leave the house. And it was like something really at that point had a hold of her. And it was just it made her unrecognizable to some of her family. Now, to me and my uh immediate family, my mom, dad, and brother, she was nothing but sweet. I mean, she is a sassy old bird, but she was very kind to us. She was tough, but she wouldn't she wouldn't treat us like she was treating some other people that she would encounter. And I think she, at that point, she really did become the town pariah, and people would, they probably were talking about how she was weird and kind of crazy, because it was like that the big house on the hill, where, oh, that's the big, I think the town looked at it and was like, that's the big creepy haunted house. Because I think a lot of people might even remember when the person that lived there before did all the seances and all the stuff. And, um, I'm sure they've seen, because you can be outside the house and see apparitions. You can see things. And I'm sure they have witnessed things driving by and stuff. They have to have seen things. So, I'm sure it just kind of built up this image of my grandmother, which kind of it fed off of, because it made her more isolated, and then she'd get more frustrated and more angry, and it just kind of was a cycle of getting more angry, then talking to the spirit, whatever spirits were there. But she didn't call them spirits, they were just the voices. But they were really, I mean, it was something that really got her. I mean, because spinning in circles and spitting at people and all these things is not a normal behavior at all. But like, when they were kids, before it got real menacing, is like things like um things like the radio would start playing, and there's this radio up in the attic. And this was another thing, is the attic was such a big attic, and it had this little tiny door, and we were never allowed to go in that attic. Like when I'd go up to stay, we weren't allowed to go in there. It was like she was like, no, don't go near that door. And I think as a kid I thought, oh, it must be dangerous. But when we did finally open it after she passed, it was like, there's nothing dangerous in here. What was in here? But there's a whole story that, like, when we did open it, I was downstairs and my mom and her sister opened it, and I was downstairs and I heard these horrible sounds, like the shingles were being ripped off the roof, and actually they were being ripped off the roof, because I looked out the window and they were flying off the roof. And my aunt and my mom were like, what is that noise? It sounds like something's eating the roof. They're in the attic. I'm in the downstairs seeing this happen. And I'm like, what is going on? So I'm looking for them, and they're like hearing something like bipedal hooved something clomp around, like, on the roof. It's like heavy clomping, and it's just like the spookiest thing, and it's the snarling, and like it's these sounds that are like inhuman. And my aunt looks to my mom and is like, I think it's squirrels. And it's like, yeah, I don't know any squirrel that makes that noise. Like, that's really loud for a squirrel. But
Right. Squirrels don't have hoofs,
yeah.
So what you're saying is, so was this door locked? Was this room?
I don't. The thing is about that house, you could lock every door in that house and walk away and turn around, and it would be unlocked. So nothing stayed locked.
Nothing stayed locked. But when you opened that door, it was like you guys had let something out.
I would say, yeah, that's kind of how I felt that's how I felt. Yeah, I was pretty sure that something was meant to stay in there, because it was
that
just,
your grandmother was warning you guys about, like, don't go up there into the attic.
Yeah, because she didn't, like, I would always play in the attic, and she'd all of a sudden do this to me. I'd be sitting there playing with my mom's old toys, and she'd go, okay, time to go. And it was like she was in a hurry. I'm like, what are we in a hurry for? There's like nothing going on. It's it's middle of the day, no one's here. And she always did that. She'd rush me out of a room, like something was like she was in a hurry to go. Like if we were in the basement, all of a sudden she'd be like, okay, we gotta go. And it was just kind of weird to all of a sudden have to get up and go. And as a kid, you're like, no, I want to play. And she's like, no, we have to go now. And it was always, and now looking back at some of these things, because as a kid, I didn't know what spirits were, ghosts were. I didn't know any of these things. So as a kid, I'm just like, oh, it's nothing. But when I start getting older and start seeing all these other signs with my grandmother and all this other stuff happen, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, it's
almost like your grandmother could see these things when no one else could.
Yeah.
And whoever owned the house, like you said before, owned the house, I kind of agree with you on that. when they were doing these summonings, that they were opening portals and they never closed them. And then when your family bought this house on the hill, uh, your grandmother, I guess, because of the time that she spent there, the house eventually, I guess, kind of got a hold of her, as you said, and would not let her go. And that's where it kind of seemed like she was possessed. Was not really possessed like a demon possessed her, more like the house and the entities or whatever is there was able to grab a hold of her and didn't want her to leave that house. And
Yeah.
so everything that happened, she would be there. And it's almost like, hey, something's about to come through the portal. So she's like, oh, let's go, girls, let's go. It's time to leave. And she would get you guys out of there. That's kind of what I'm drawing from it.
Yeah, that's kind of now, like, that's kind of how I feel too. Like, she sensed something, like, there's, like, it was like she had a connection with it, like you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So she could sense when, like, something's about to happen, or, because it was weird how much happened after we got her out of that house. As the house just really was angry. Like, you could tell it was an angry place to be. But, like, there's so many happy spirit stories there too. So, like, for instance, my mom, when she was a little girl, she was visited by this woman who had come, and she was tangible and everything. She said she had kind of a glow to her, but she was tangible because she would brush my mom's hair every night, and for a long time. So my mom gets her sister, who's older, and says, "Hey, there's this woman who keeps coming to see, And so she says, "Okay." Her sister says, "Okay, I'll sleep in the room with you tonight, and I'll see her." Well, sure enough, she appears, and my aunt says, "Oh my gosh, that's Grandma so and so," and the spirit put her hands over her mouth like, "Oh, I just been caught," and then she vanished, and then she never came back. But uh my mom really loved that grandmother, but it was the younger version of her. But apparently, my mom, I guess she didn't even know that's who she was, because she came to her in a younger version, a younger image. But my uh, aunt did recognize her, and so I think it upset the spirit, because she was the spirit was there to see my mom, and she didn't want to be caught. And I think it really, like, it scared her away. But I feel like that's such a happy kind of spirit story. And so I want it to be known that it wasn't just total evil that was coming through there. It was just so many things that came through there. On Christmas Eve, my mom told her dad so bad that she wanted her grandpa to come visit her so bad. And that night, a man in overalls came and stood by her bed. And, so, and he was in, like, blue and white overalls. It was pretty much the exact things that he would wear. She said he was thinner, but it looked like him still. And I'll tell you, I've stayed in that house, and I had someone in overalls watching me personally, in one of the rooms. And I still, like, when I don't even have to close my eyes to see it. It's clear as day in my head. I can just see this man in overalls. And actually, I was terrified, because I didn't know who or what he was. And it was just menacing to me that someone was staring at me while I'm trying to sleep. So that was terrifying for me. Because I was young, and I didn't really, like I said, understand what a ghost was. My parents didn't talk about that sort of thing. It was just not. I as a kid, I said I saw Jesus when, and we hadn't even. I wasn't even old enough to have been taught about Jesus. So, I mean, like, I had so many things happen at an early age, um, and then, so, like, you would hear footsteps up and down the halls at night, and you could hear them check on several of the rooms, but it would stop before it ever got to, like, my grandparents' room. So my mom would hear this thing walk around the hall, check on both of the rooms, and then stop. and be gone. So, you think, okay, well, it's maybe it's their parents checking on them, because that makes sense if it hits both the kids' rooms, right? But it doesn't go to the parents' room afterwards, and they could hear them snoring in the other room. And so whatever it was checking on them, and you would hear your name being called constantly. Like, you always would hear your name, and you were sure you heard it, like positive, to the point that my mom was already scared as a kid, but she would get up and go all the way downstairs and turn on the kitchen light because she heard it. And which is ironic, because the kitchen is attached to the basement. So there's the way the house is set up is there's like the back door. You come in it, and when you come in it, you can either go straight forward and it leads down some steps that go to the cellar, or you can go towards the left, and then it would go straight up to the kitchen. And so there was an instance where I was holding the door open to go inside to get my grandmother's umbrella. She was mowing, she wanted the umbrella, and this gush of wind just went through my face, and it was like pushed me back, and I hurt. And you know how you can hear something so loud sometimes that you're not even you're like, did I hear that with my ears or like my body? Because it was like I could feel the words, but it said like get out, like so loud, and like it was like bone chilling. It was the scariest thing for me. And I ran to my grandmother, and she was like she's like, yeah, I know there's something in there. And then she's like, but go get my umbrella from the closet. And I was positive something was going to jump out at me from that closet. And so, but I stood in front of it forever, like just trying to get the courage to open the closet. And it was the most terrifying thing for me as a kid. That was the first time I started actually being frightened by anything. Was when that happened, because nothing had yelled at me or scared me, like was mean to me before. And that's when it started, getting kind of mean to me anyway. And one time I was down there, my grandmother had a ringing washing machine, one of those ringing ones that you like crank it, and it's like, the old, I think it plugged in, but it was not like super powerful or anything. I think it just did the agitation, and then you had to use the wringer to strain your clothes out or whatever. And I was down in the basement, and I probably shouldn't have been, but I was doing something down there, and all of a sudden the washing machine goes from one side of that ringing machine, and it's not plugged in, so it's not on or anything. And it goes from one side of the room to the other and pushes me up against the wall. And I'm getting pushed up against the wall. And my grandmother comes down into the basement, is like, what are you doing down here? Or, quit playing around, come upstairs. And I'm like squished up against the wall by this ringing washing machine. And I'm like, okay, and I didn't know about ghosts or spirits. I knew the basement was spooky because it gave me chills. Like, just because you don't know about the supernatural things doesn't mean your body doesn't react to the environment that is kind of creepy around you, because it was creepy. But I went upstairs, and I didn't even really tell her about it. I don't think I told my parents till just recently, because I just remembered it, and I was like, oh yeah, well, this one time this happened to me, and I guess it was not the washing machine's fault. So
Wow,
yeah.
you were a brave little girl, because I'd have been screaming if I'm getting pinned up against a wall by a machine or anything. Yeah, and your mother says, "Come on up," and you're like, "Yeah, I'm good. I'm good up in a minute." And you're fighting a washing machine.
I did, well, I don't know if this is why, but I like our washing machine at our house would like bang around, So I just thought all washing machines kind of were very violent things. And so I wasn't like afraid that this machine was being pushed by something or whatever. I just felt like, I just thought, oh, it's, just being a washing machine. But now I'm like, no, that was definitely not a normal washing machine thing, because it was just it was not one of those those big commercial ones. It was,
Right.
The old timey ones. So yeah.
Do you know why the house? Did you ever figure out why the house didn't like you for some reason?
Me or like my whole family? Because I feel
Well,
like
I think it liked your grandmother. We kind of established that like it
I
seems to
think it
have
did. Yeah, I
it liked
agree.
her, and then everybody else was just there.
Well,
And it,
I don't know. In my opinion, this is my opinion, but I'll leave it up to like professionals. But my opinion is it really didn't like a lot of people, like because it wanted it wanted grandma all to itself, and I felt like that was its source of energy, its livelihood, everything, and and I think it was just mean to everybody, and I think it tormented my grandmother, but um, it made her kind of crazy, but it fed off that energy that she got. So I just feel like it didn't really want anybody around. It wanted to keep her all to itself and isolate her and make her the most miserable person she could be because of what it was doing to her. I think she was such a happy person, and she really did love us, and she was so good. I just think it just broke her, and it made her just to the point where there was a point where she was just unrecognizable it's to some of us, not to me personally, but
what was your like your grandmother's faith? Like, do you think?
I believe we were all Christian faith.
Okay,
Yeah.
do you think that maybe she invited any of that? Like, do you think?
I think she was not afraid to threaten something that challenge something that may have presented itself. That's something I do think. I think she'd be like, um, some people are like, you want a piece of me? I don't know if that's, I don't know if she would do that, but I know she was tough, and she would say, you can't hurt me. Just try and come at me.
Right, she's the person. This is my home. I've been here, and you can't take it from me. So,
Yeah.
I guess during all those years, it was her and whatever thing or entity lived in that house, her and it battles, I guess, on a daily, to the
Yes.
point to where your family could see the kind of like the change of behavior, the amount
Yes.
of stress, how it affected her looks, to where you could see that it was draining her of her
Yeah,
life.
her teeth. The last time, like before her stroke incident, I saw her, and I was actually pretty afraid of seeing when I saw her. She was so frail. Turns out she wasn't going upstairs at all. In that huge house, she couldn't even get upstairs. She's living there by herself. I mean, she should have not been there by herself, and her teeth were completely blacked out, and it was kind of scary to look at. Like it was, I was actually frightened. I felt so bad for her that she had gotten it was like she just had no one to care for her, or she didn't care that she was that she was falling apart like that. It was very, very, very sad. That I just remember her teeth, and it was just like, oh my gosh, I've never seen such black teeth. It was crazy.
So, at a point to where your grandmother couldn't take care of herself is when the family took her out of the house.
We tried many times.
Okay.
Her sister tried, did the power of attorney thing, and
Hmm.
we fought it, but she ultimately won. Um, what ended up getting her out of the house was her stroke, and her stroke is kind of one of those crazy stories that she's walking out in the snow in the middle of winter. I think she was getting like something from the store, because she had to walk to the town to get stuff, and she had a stroke in this and fell in the snowbank, and she's laying there in the snowbank trying to crawl home to her home with one arm because she's paralyzed on half her body. She only had one arm that was working, and she was paralyzed. She's trying to crawl home, and someone drives by and sees her and is like, oh my gosh, let me take you to a hospital. And she goes, no, just get me to the house. Just get me to the house. That's all she wanted, was to get back to the house. And she was fighting them. And I mean, a person who just had a stroke, who can barely say anything because she can't speak. her mouth isn't working. She's paralyzed. I mean, when I saw her after the stroke, she couldn't say anything. So I don't even know how she told the person all she wanted to do is go to the house. Cause obviously I wasn't there, but that's what the person said. And I'm like, I don't even know how she could say that. Cause she couldn't even, we had to reteach her everything. So I don't know, but it wanted her back in the house. And
That house, yeah, that house had a strong hold on her to the point to where any normal person that has had a stroke would have been taken to the hospital. They're not thinking about just get me back to the house, because that, to me, that sounds like that house has such a profound and deep, strong hold over her to where it's like it even took over her ability to speak to tell that person to get me back to the house.
Yeah, I agree. It's like that to me. That says so much about what kind of hold that house had on her. Is, I mean, any person with any kind of self-preservation would go, you know what, I probably need medical attention right now, and I can come back to the house later. But the house would not let her go for a minute,
And nobody in their right mind, even though she would have said, take me to the home, it's like, nah, you can go back to home after you go through the hospital. It's like, because anybody else, like you said, in their right mind or anybody in the self-preservation is not going to be thinking about, give me back to my house. Especially when you guys found her, you're like, she can't even speak. So how could she have told you this when she can't speak? And that's why I'm like, I feel like something like almost like the house took over.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel like that's the start of the severing of the connection between the houses when we got her out of it. But up until then, it had such a hold and we could not get her out. And even when the first few things that she said when she finally could speak again was, I want to go home. I want to go home. And of course, most people want to go home. They do. But she really wanted to be in that home. And, it took us a long time to try to because we didn't want to just tell her you can't go back. It was because she was not, she was just never going to be in the shape to go home and live by herself again. So it was really tough to try to break that to her. And there was a night where we took her back to the home to visit it. I know that probably not a smart thing to do, right? But yeah, we did. We took her back to the home to say goodbye, and she wanted to stay the night. So we decided to stay the night, but I went into the house. I couldn't breathe. It was like there was just the air had been sucked out of that house. I could not breathe, and I was the first one to notice it. It was just impossible to breathe. I said, I can't even be in here right now. I can't breathe. And so, my dad, eventually he's like, I'm starting to not be able to breathe either. And so, we sleep out in this SUV car, thing. We sleep out there, and in the middle of the night, of course, as all kids do, I gotta go to the bathroom. So, I go into, I have him, he goes with me. Cause I think I was a little scared, even though I'm older than I like to admit to be scared, but, he comes in with me, and, I'm in the restroom, and I just had this strong sense of something coming down over my head when I'm it's like I could envision. It's like when you sometimes you see something so real in your mind, you're like, it must be happening right now. And so I really wanted out of the bathroom as fast as I could. So I get out, and my dad goes in, and I'm standing there, and I'm facing the front door of the house, which is inoperable at this point. The porch is all worn down. You can't use it. So everybody, for the entire time I knew my grandmother and my grandparents lived there, we used the back door always. So, but I'm looking at the front door, which the staircase is to the right of it from that direction. And there's a giant mirror, huge mirror, big mirror at the end of the staircase. And I swear I'm standing there, and I can feel something from the top of the staircase looking at me through the mirror. I could tell something was looking at me through the mirror. It's just one of those things that I could sense. I like to say I'm a little bit like, what do you like I'm an empathetic kind of person, so I feel a lot of things and stuff when I go places and stuff. Feel I just feel that way. So I felt like it was watching me. And when uh I felt like I could it's like I could hear its footsteps coming down the stairs and but watching me the entire time in the through the mirror, watching me through the mirror coming down the stairs slowly, but then it starts going faster. So I start like banging on the door like, "Dad, hurry up." And he's like, "Just a minute." And I'm like, "No, you really need to come out." And I'm freaking out. I'm start like freaking out. So I turn my back to the mirror because I'm like I can't look at it anymore because which took so much energy because I was like paralyzed and to turn and I'm standing there at the wall and I can feel it coming up behind me. And then my dad opens the door and it's like immediately gone. And so, but then all of a sudden we hear choking and we go and check on my mom and aunt who are actually sleeping in that green room with the piano that I mentioned earlier. They were sleeping in there and they woke up and they're rubbing their throats and they're sitting there saying, "We were just being choked. Like, we feel like we were just being choked." And I was like, I just had something coming down the stairs at me. And then it like turned tail from there. But then they all of a sudden got choked. And then there's my grandmother sleeping on the couch in the next room so peacefully. And she's just like almost like smiling, almost like she's just so happy to be in the home. And here we all are like standing around like, "Oh my gosh, this is what." So we took her back after that. You know, and she did eventually, you know, um, I feel like it took a long time, but she did finally start becoming that same sweet person that she was when she moved into that house. I do feel like at some point that house, its bond did sever, and I wonder if it happened when it changed ownership. I'm not sure exactly, but I know that she would say things about the she would say things like the time I mentioned the physical line to cross. She mentioned that. She also said, when my aunt said, "Oh, well, we're selling the house," and she'd say, "Oh, well, the new owners they don't know what they're in for." And my aunt would say, "Oh, I know it needs a lot of work." And she said, "That's not what I mean." And it was like, that was kind of weird and ominous. Like, like,
Yeah,
what,
she already knew things that no one else wanted to even think about. That's
yeah,
why she says, leaving that whole with
yeah,
everybody with, it's not what I'm saying. Like,
yeah,
they have
yeah,
a whole lot of stuff about to happen to them.
right. And it's just, so it's very strange. But like, there's instances, like I said, of things that happened to my mom. There was one time my mom was sitting in the living room and a man went chased it must have been like his daughter, but a little girl ran through the room and there was a man chasing her, and it was just plain as day, like, "Oh, don't mind me running through the living room playing tag." And my mom's just like, "What?" just like, and it was just a common occurrence to see people in this house. It was so common that it was like, but nobody really talked about. And the thing is, it's so funny, it baffles me how no one could think that it could possibly be haunted or something, because of, like, of course, like, how, or maybe it was just so obvious that it was haunted that they didn't have to talk about it. I don't know. And I don't know, is it a haunted when it seems like more of a possession? I don't know that, and I'm not sure. But I know when my grandfather passed away, the night he that we kind of had a bonfire and burned a lot of stuff, things that were trying to clear the house out for my grandmother to make it livable for her by herself and stuff, because she had never been by herself. And we had a huge bonfire, and that night I slept on the living room sofa with my two cousins, and I woke up and looked straight ahead of me, and out the dining room window which is a huge dining room. This house had like huge windows. It had like a maid's quarters and different things at some point that they removed. Like it had double kitchens, like one for a maid and one for the actual homeowners. It was a really elaborate house, but out the dining room window there's a man staring at me, and I swear it was my grandfather. I swore it was. And I tell my dad in the morning, and he's like, okay, but didn't it kind of made me feel like like, because again, my dad wasn't the one to say, especially at this point, he didn't really have too much to believe in the supernatural stuff. That was before, it was a different time. Now there's a lot of stuff that's come out, and he's much more open to that sort of thing. But back then it was like, we don't talk about that stuff because it's a little weird and kooky. But then he didn't bother to tell me that my mom had woke up and she said she saw her grandfather, her dad, standing out by the bonfire that night. And so my mom, I found out later because my dad, he's a detective, so he's out there with a shoe, one of my grandfather's shoes, trying to match, because there are actual prints all around the house that are fresh, and there are prints all around the bonfire that are fresh, which, especially by the bonfire, because that's new dirt. Like there should be no one with my grandfather's size shoe with that out around there. And the shoe was like a perfect match. And so it was like, wow, that was, so like, it wasn't always, like I said, it wasn't always terrible things that happened there. That's why I feel like it must have been some kind of portal, which, when you have a portal, good and bad can come through. Like, it's not always bad. Sometimes there's really good things, but when you let those good things through, there's evil things just waiting to jump through too. And that's what I kind of feel like. I know when I did say that they did have her committed so that she could get that furnace, the man who put the furnace in said he heard sounds down in that basement that he has never heard in his life, and he said he would never come back. And he was really terrified. So he didn't want anything to do with that house after putting the furnace in. Pretty much like, you know what, I put it in, but you're gonna have someone else service it because I'm out. I'm done.
I don't blame him. I don't blame him. I'd be the same way.
Yeah, I hate to think of if he crossed that physical line. Because I think that if that's what it was, I hate to think a poor man. I hope, like I
would hope not.
Well, and that's what I to this day, I still have things happen to me. And there's things that happen to me in a lot of my houses, and I feel like there was a time where I was stupid and I did something kind of dumb, and we went back to the house, and I was told, by some people, don't touch it, don't go in it, don't anything, don't, because you don't want anything to attach to you. And I know this in my mind. In my mind, I'm going, okay, whatever, and I'm like, what do I do when I first get there? Hey, Dad, take a picture of me with my hand on it. And it's like I'm sitting there daring it. Like, I'm like, look, I'm touching the ghost house,
taunt it.
Yeah. So, and then I send those pictures to like my boss and friends and everything. All of a sudden I start getting blown up. I lost my job. I lost my friends. Like, everyone started saying, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Like, all these things. I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And I was like, are you serious? Like, what? And I'm on this trip with my parents and I'm trying to have a good time. And then all this stuff's happening. And then I get very sick. My dad had to carry me up to bed at one point because I got so sick. And this is all after I went and touched this house. And, I just feel like things kind of have snowballed for me at some point with, I constantly feel watched. And like,
how old were you when you touched that house?
This was when I was like 25, 27. So probably 10 years ago. Yeah, about 10 years ago.
And you sent that picture to all your friends?
Yeah, I sent it to like all my
you touching the house, and
yeah.
They got some type of after effect of it.
Yeah, and like they would just say like, I don't really want to be your friend anymore. And like my boss was like, when are you coming to work? And I'm like, well, I just sent you a picture. I'm on my trip that you approved. And she's like, well, you're supposed to be here. And I'm like, no, no, you and she's like, well, you're fired. And I went back in there and they escorted me out and tried to put me in handcuffs like I did something wrong. And I was like, what? What is going on? So, they told me I couldn't come back there. And I was like, what did happen? Cause I'm such a, like, I actually was employee of the month. I had like so many awards, like my name's all over. Like I was never a bad employee or anything like that. I didn't say anything bad. Like I was just really nice. I have no idea what happened. So it was so weird that happened. And I still like, I don't think anybody really believes that story, to be honest. They probably are like, what did you do? Cause it's
Well, that kind of makes me think like you went there and taunted the house,
yeah.
after having warnings, and the house is like, okay, whatever's there is like, I'll show you.
Yeah. Like it knew I knew. It knew I knew. It's like I knew better. And so by knowing better and then I do it anyway, like, was that really a smart thing to do? No, that was probably the dumbest. That was really stupid. That was not a smart thing to do at
Because it's
all.
going to be kind of hard to say coincidence that all of a sudden you're on a vacation and your boss is like, nah, you're on that vacation no more. You need to come in now.
Yeah,
And
like,
then you're like, what? And he's
and
like,
I'd
you're
just been
fired.
talking to her. I was literally just talking to her about the trip. Like we were having a fun conversation and everything. So she knew. So it went from like knowing everything about like about my trip and knowing I was on it to all of a sudden being like, "Where are you?" Like we were just having a conversation. It was like their minds were just erased. It was just the weirdest. It was so weird. I was like, "How can you? Do you just read two texts back? We've been talking all morning." Like,
Here's a theory that I think that just popped in my head. What if you slipped through a portal? What if when you touch that house, it's like, all right, come on over to this side,
you know what?
and it could, because that's because you're talking about conversation. They're like, hey, everything's going great, and then boom, now they're acting like you hadn't had this conversation before. I didn't approve your vacation. You should have already been here. It's almost like you slipped into another parallel universe.
It was that weird. It was that weird. It was very weird. I don't even know how to explain that. And I spent a lot of the trip on the way home crying and like my poor dad had to suffer with me crying because I was not understanding why everything was going like to pieces around me. I was like, what is going on?
Interesting. It makes me kind of want to go towards that theory of that you could have slipped into another parallel universe.
I'm totally open to believing so many things because there's so much we just don't understand. And if you have a portal that's big enough, that seems feasible because what is a portal to another dimension other than maybe it's another parallel dimension. We don't know.
Right. It could be like, I know of one person told me it could be like thinning the veil. Like where you were was thin enough that you slipped through, or that you walked through, you passed through, and that's where your conversation with your boss goes a totally different way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it was just too weird, and
Interesting.
things kind of not. I mean, it's just things kind of got not so good for me after that for a while. But it's like I, I don't even know where to go because I feel like I'm jumping around because I have like more stories about that house, but then I also have so many things about what's been going on to me lately and currently because I still feel things and like I caught recently uh a very good mist in my on my camera and I don't watch the cameras all the time. We're not like those fancy people that have the Ring doorbell that say, "Oh, alert, something's moving," and then you check it and you have a video. No, like if you don't catch it live, you're not going to see it cuz we have a bunch of cameras, but we're not always watching them. But that night I had been waiting for a package and this was just in February, I think, maybe. And I was waiting for a package, so I had the cameras pulled up on my bedroom TV while I was sleeping, and I woke up to check for the package, and I see this mist coming up the side of my house, turning down and around my car, going up to the top of another camera, going back past my car, and then crosses the front porch, and it never changes mass. It stays just as big, and it's no fog, no smoke, nothing. I mean, it would have dissipated at some point, but it just stays really big. And I mean, it was just an amazing mist. I think that, and so it was the first time my husband was like, okay, because he's an IT guy, and he does installation of cameras. That's why we have cameras. He installs cameras and things. So he's seen a ton of camera footage in his time. And even he goes, he's trying to debunk it because, that's what his mind says to do. Because he's totally does not believe in any of this heebie-jeebie stuff, is he probably referred to it. But, he's watching it, and he just can't. He's like, I don't even know what that could be. And I'm like, yeah, I know. It's because it travels so far. So then now he's starting to be like, yeah, I guess there could be some. Because I've seen big, giant beach ball sized orbs in the backyard, which I have all that limestone. I have tons of limestone boulders back there. So I know that those are like supposed to be conductors or something for like residuals or something like that. I'm not, like an expert, but that's what I've been told. And so I seen these huge orbs, and, I kind of watch enough of the cameras to know the difference between a bug and an orb, especially something on the lens. And when you have it on multiple cameras at the same time, but different angles, it's not on the lens. Stuff like that. But there was I was seeing these giant glowing orbs in that exact same spot for like a year, in the middle of the night or early morning at times. And he would say, oh no, it's nothing. Oh, it's nothing. But now I'm like, okay, but that mist manifested like right exactly where that was. So now I'm like, something is in that area of the yard. But it's just, there's just so much stuff, and I feel like it's attached to me, because everywhere I go, it's there. I feel the fear all the time. I have night terrors. I have so many current things that I go through. Things get moved around in the middle of the night. My things will move in the bedroom, and I'll hear them, and it's like nobody was near it. I have a calendar block, and it like talks if you move the little squares around. And in the middle of the night, a few nights, or a few months ago, I'm sorry, it just, the blocks fell off of it and starts talking, and I'm nowhere near it. My son is nowhere near it. We're both laying in bed asleep, and I wake up out of deep sleep to see that, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like what could have, because nothing else was disturbed around it. How could just those blocks have done that? It was just so weird. And like, the more I talk about this stuff, especially because, I was preparing all this stuff with my mom. And I have a whole list of stories that have happened to her and me at that house. I have a bunch more, but, we were going over, I was like, I need a refresher, Mom. And every time, because I know it's taken us a while to get to finally record this. So I've been prepping every time we go to do it. I'm like, I got to get prepped. Well, every time we've done that, something weird happens in the house, like weird things. Like the last time, like I've had my mom and I were talking, and their phone was getting distorted. Like there was like a CB radio kind of distorting us or something, and we couldn't hear each other, and it kept like cutting out real bad and dying. We're on FaceTime, and then in all of a sudden, and it's in the middle of the morning, like just in the morning, for no reason, my power cuts off. Like the power just goes off, and we're in the middle of talking about these stories, and every time I talk about these stories, stuff starts happening. So the power cuts off, and then my dad gets a nosebleed. And like while we're talking about it, we're on the phone, and she's like, "Oh no, your dad's getting a nosebleed right now." And it's like, okay. And then I'm in the kitchen cooking one night, and we're talking about it. And my mom's like, "Oh, hi, Mike," or whatever. And this thing walks behind me, and she thinks it's, my husband. Well, um the there's she's like, oh, I just saw someone walk behind you. And I was like, no, you didn't. I'm like, that's a cupboard. There's nothing behind me. She's like, no, I saw a person walk behind you. There's a person there. I'm like, no, there's no one even in the kitchen with me. There's no way you saw. And there's no like um windows or anything in that area that it could be like reflecting off of or anything. So it's just, there's a you know person behind me like randomly, and I'm still terrified because that's actually where the cupboards constantly are opening in the middle of the night, and it scares the crap out of me because they're constantly like the cupboards will open on me. Like if I'm doing dishes, they'll creak open, and I'm like, no, don't do that. Because sometimes I get up in the middle of the night, I can't sleep because I'm having night terrors, and I have these horrible dream images, things that, and it's always something like super creepy. I hate to even say, like, it feels like demonic. It really does. It feels so scary, and I have these horrible terrors, and um they're always coming after me and my son, and it's so scary for me. It really, 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 and I'm like, I really am scared of it, and I don't sleep very good sometimes because it's very strong, and um, you know, I just, it's like something's in here, and I can feel it watching me all the time, and I can't stand the mirrors that I have in here because I feel like it watches me through the mirrors at times. And I'm not like a creepy paranoid, kind of crazy person. I'm actually, I'm pretty worldly, and like, cuz I like to travel and I like all this stuff, and I'm pretty brave, but that does have me really freaked out. And it just, when something's trying to mess with you in your sleep, because I have these dreams where I can actually, I'm in control of everything I'm doing. I'm sitting there begging and praying and praying, praying, praying to God to make him stop, make him stop. And I can control what's going on with me in the dream. I can't control what's happening. And there will be times where I will wake up in the dream, and then I think I'm awake, and I'm like, oh, good. But it's still there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't wake up. And I'm in my dream, like, wake up, wake up. And I'm trying to wake myself up. I can't wake up. And I know I need to wake up, and I'm trying so hard. And then I keep thinking I'm awake, but I can feel myself so groggy that I can't, like, I'm like trapped in there. And it's very terrifying for me. Um, I know that's kind of like crazy, but
No, no, no. Like I said, I've talked to several people that have talked about, having night terrors or having the sleep paralysis, or even myself, I've experienced sleep paralysis. So no, I understand. It's scary. I've even had myself have had dreams where I thought I was out of a dream, and when I thought I was actually in another dream. So it was like
yeah,
I had stepped into another dream, another level of a dream, and it's like, how do I get out of this one? And so, no, no, I understand. I don't think that's crazy. I think
yeah,
I think a lot of people experience this. A lot of people just don't know what it is. A lot of people, there's so much going on. A lot of people just chalk it off as, hey, it was just a dream. But I'm starting to look into more of like, when they talk about dream walkers, are they talking about where dreams are not just dreams?
yeah, yeah. I don't feel like this. It does not feel like a. I I feel like I know the difference between like a. It's like, because I'm so awake, I'm so alert, I can feel and sense everything in the room around me. It's like I can, I'm like, I know what's in the room. I know where I can see my baby, because he sleeps with me, and I can feel him in my arms, and I can see the certain lights because I keep a lot of lights on. It helps my anxiety, but I can see all of them and everything. But then I'm like, it's like it just feels like there's something pulling me down, and I just don't feel like it's just like, I don't feel like it's just a normal nightmare. Like, I remember having nightmares as a kid, and I just this doesn't feel like just typical nightmares. I don't know, I feel like there's really something here, and I feel like it's getting a little bit a little bit meaner every time. Like it messes with me because like I had a like toy, my son's toy, and for instance, his little frisbee. He has this little frisbee he loves, but he lost it for like a month, and I looked everywhere, like everywhere, and I mean under everything, everywhere. Well, then, and I'm also a neat freak. I don't leave trash. I don't do anything like that. But I have a dresser, and I was like, I dropped something on the floor one day by it, and I looked down, and sticking out from like not out from under the dresser, but like right, totally visible because it's like a high. It's not a super low dresser. Like it has a big gap where you should be able to see under it pretty well. There, the frisbee's sitting right there, and and behind it is the thing that I dropped, like behind it. So like how did that thing bounce over the frisbee and get there? Like if the frisbee was, it's like someone just put the frisbee right there, and there's no way my son did it because he wasn't even walking or crawling or none of that stuff at the time. You know, this was before he was mobile. And so there's just no way. I'm the only one in this room, me and my baby, and there's just no way he could have that could have happened. And it's just little things like that that make you think you're going crazy because you're like, how did this happen? And like my son has these cell phones, these little toy cell phones, and they can say things. And of course, they don't say anything all day long. They won't say nothing. In the middle of the night, when you're laying there, all of a sudden they'll go bye bye, and you're like, really, really, you're gonna do that to me right now? No. And it's like, it's it's like comical, but it's like, come on, that's not even funny. Don't do that. That scares me. And it's like, and why bye bye? Couldn't you say anything but bye bye right now? Like, don't do that.
Right, right.
Like, I mean, I know it sounds like it's one of those things. It's like, okay, that's just something from a movie. You're like, it's too perfect that it can't be true, but they are true things, and that's what's like really, you know. But as far as like things with my grandmother, there's still like, so when my aunt went, she's a pastor, and when she went to the house, she went to it, and several times after to collect things for my grandmother when she had her stroke. And there was a time she walked in there, and the house, all the cupboards and everything was covered in this white mold, this white fluffy, like it looked like cotton all over everything, like everything, tons of it. And there's no explanation for it. And she starts going into the different rooms to take pictures of things at one point. And she starts trying to take pictures, and she starts getting this feeling, this, you know, she's a pastor, so, you know, whatever, but she starts getting this feeling, and so she starts praying, room to room praying, and each room starts filling up with smoke, like a fog, and it starts filling, it start I'm sorry. I'm sorry, my baby's trying to my son's trying to come in here. It starts filling with this like fog, and and she's praying room to room, and it's like it just keeps filling and filling, and and you know, and she of course she'll tell you it was like no big deal, like she blows it off like, oh, you know, it's probably dust, but she'll tell you the story like with sounding like it's you know, creepy, but then like be like totally dismissive of it. And then there's a time where uh she she's driving home. I think it might have been the same instance, but she's driving home, and this actually happened twice to her, but once she gets home, she felt something kind of not right, but she gets home and she hears something scream to her to get out, and it was just as she opened her door to her house, and she had one of those garages that had glass like all around it on the windows. And what happened was she opened the door and she just stepped into her house, and she heard get out like real fast, but she wasn't really super scared of what it said. But when she stepped her foot in the house, the garage door slammed and all the windows in the entire garage just exploded outwards. And like just big explosion outwards, all the windows. She had to replace every window. And it was like something, she thinks it was like an angel warning her. She doesn't feel like it was a threat. She does feel like something bad was trying to do it, but she felt like it was an angel warning her that told her to get out, to get away from what was happening.
That's why she didn't perceive it as being scary.
Yeah, I would say that's why. And then, but there was another time, she was going to the house and she saw the curtains moving in the basement. Like they had those those little tiny windows with the tiny baby curtains. She sees the curtains like moving down there. So she goes in there and starts like trying to figure out what's going on. She can't figure it out, but then she I think she took a picture or something. And then she goes to drive home and she gets out of her car and starts praying and like saying that like you need to leave, get out of here, you're not welcome, all this stuff. And that it's you're not welcome here, go home, go back to the house where you belong, and all this stuff, like just demanding it leave. And there's a time where she actually went to her friend's church with her, and there she's being in, I guess he's in the middle of his sermon or something like that, and he asks my aunt's friend, oh, you brought a friend with you today? And he's like, he says to my aunt, where have you been? And she's like, why? And he's like, well, there's a demon attached to you. And she'd literally just come from the house. And he's like, no, there's a demon attached to you. It's on your back right now. And it's like, so she's like, oh, and and it's one of those things that normally you might think that's kind of like, coincidental or whatever. It's just like, or that you're in a church and someone says that, because they sometimes say that stuff. But it's like, no, coming from that house, you kind of believe it after you've seen the things that you'd seen in that house. It's like, I believe that a little bit.
So what happened? Did she do anything about it, or she just?
I think they
just kind of shrug him off, as you just kind of shrug him off as what he said.
No,
yeah, I have a demon. Okay, whatever.
Yeah. Oh, that's just my friend. No, I think they ended up like praying. I think. I'm sorry.
No, I said it sounds like she's like, oh, it's just William. Don't
yeah. Oh, yeah. I think she like just like they prayed about it and stuff to try. I don't know if they exorcised a demon. I don't know how they got. I don't know if he could see it leave or not. I don't know if she left the church before they. I feel like maybe he is like, she went home and did her thing that she does to do. I just know that's, I guess that's like only half a story. I don't know the whole thing, but there's that. And then like,
and most of these stories have been told to you by your grandmother, by your aunt, by other family members.
Some of them have been told by my aunt, some by my mom, and then there's some that I was there for. So like, there's a time, in that house, like I said, any door that you lock will not stay locked for more than a minute in that house. Any window, we were locking all the windows, and like I would turn around and watch, like you would stare at the window, stare at it would stay locked. But the second you turned your back to it, it was one of those little hook locks, and it'd go pop, and you'd hear it, and it'd just pop open, and you'd be like, seriously? So you'd lock it, and you'd turn, and then you'd like watch it the whole way back out of the room. You'd back out of the room, and as soon as you got out of eyesight, pop, it'd pop. It was like nothing would stay locked. The attic door was constantly unlocking. And there was a time, actually, my aunt and I were standing in the kitchen, and I just locked the basement door. I shut it. For some reason, I wanted to shut the basement door because it just, I don't know, I was having a bad feeling about it. And that door went bananas just seconds after that. The handle was jiggling, it was banging, it was just furious. It was like something was trying to get in. And I looked at her and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I don't know what's going on. It was so scary. I was because that was like it was literally like someone was trying to break in the door, like someone was like banging and breaking in the door. Um, it was very frightening for me.
All right, folks, that's about wraps up this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. This will be a multiple part episode. This is just number one. It will depend on how many of these stories we can fit into the next one. Rose has a lot more to talk about, guys. I hope you guys stick this one out. I really enjoyed our conversation. Again, if you've had an encounter and you want to come on the show, you can email me at thestrangeacctspodcast@gmail.com. I will also be posting the episodes on the YouTube channel. So that's for those who don't like listening to podcasts on any of the normal platforms that are out there. So I just want to say I really appreciate everybody's dedication and their support and love for the channel so far. I also have the Instagram page as well, where I post up little trailers. So if you're interested, you can please go look that up. I will leave the links below to the YouTube channel and the Instagram channel. So again, thank you all. Have a good night, and thanks.